roads here. However, we decided to set aside some resources this year and seriously commit to this. And so the way I see it is that we need to better understand the state and the federal needs for data and information. And that led to the invitation to our panelists for this afternoon. That's what they're going to talk about. We want to be talking to legislators and staff who are responsible for decision making to see what's on their radar. And as Assemblymember Stone said this morning, you can bring me science, but if it's not something that's on my radar, that's a topic I'm working on, it's not helpful. If it is something that's relevant to a legislative issue that we have, then yes, I can take a look at it. So we want to know what those issues are that they're working on now and that they see coming down the road. We're very interested in working more closely with agency staff to understand their needs for the management priorities that they have and then the information that they need to take action on those management priorities. And then I think what we need to do within ourselves is best determine how the CSU can meet those needs while supporting faculty research and training these students, because they're integral to all of the research that gets done within the CSU. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Amy and James.
Thanks, Krista. Good morning. For those of you who've been coming to these meetings over the years or have been affiliated with COAST, you may recall that this, as Krista has alluded, the idea of informing decision-making and management has been part of COAST since its inception. But for many, many years, that was a parallel process basically being undertaken by those who were interested in it. We leveraged the interests of people in the room now and others who are no longer affiliated with COAST to ride along on their enthusiasm and try to influence the process. For instance, back, those of you who've been around for a while may remember we had networks for a while, and the Dean went, and I from Cal Poly had a policy network that attempted to draw people together from throughout the system to talk about these types of things. And it is, as Assemblymember Stone mentioned, about building relationships, and I think this is a baseball metaphor. It really requires playing long ball, in that we have realized from the beginning that we have to be a regular presence up in Sacramento and to a lesser extent in DC in order to create and cultivate the relationships to establish ourselves as a reference point for all the types of things we're interested in, the types of information we're interested in providing. So we have, as Krista just mentioned, we're trying something a little bit new and throwing some resources at this part of COAST to see how much purchase we can get by allocating more time associated with it. That's what Amy and I are going to spend a couple minutes talking about now. So just to reemphasize, this is all nested within the original strategic plan, and it exists in the current strategic plan too, in addition to all the various aspects of supporting faculty and staff that we just talked about, and students. The idea that we would be informing government staff and elected officials is something we've always felt very strongly about, and so there is, in the plan we all approved, a dimension of this. We have, since 2009, we've had multiple prongs. Those prongs have changed from time to time, but the idea is that we've wanted to do multiple things simultaneously, including increase the visibility of COAST so that Assembly members and senators and agency staff know we're coming when we come to Sacramento. They know the type of history, the types of work that we do, and start to avail themselves of our access. One of the things that I may have mentioned at a previous meeting, one of Krista and my initial meetings in Sacramento back in 2009, we were sitting with a staff member for a key committee, and he admitted to us that before he talks to a human being, he goes to Wikipedia. And so if he's writing legislation, he was going to Wikipedia and then Google, and then he might talk to somebody with some content expertise. And we were kind of horrified on that front for a number of years. And in fact, I actually developed a course project to make Wikipedia more informative on particular topics in response to that thing. I'm not sure how that works. But so one of the things we've been trying to do is represent ourselves, COAST, as a one single point sort of contact for all of the expertise surrounding, from within the campuses to get at that problem. Call us. We will, as quickly as possible, turn things around and put you, agency person or committee staff, in touch with the bigger picture. We've also tried to build partnerships, to think about larger sources of funding. The President Ochoa described this morning, has been very supportive, as has the Chancellor. But take on. We all know that more money is necessary to do many of the things that we're interested in doing right. And one of the things we also want to do, and have been pretty good at that so far, is position individual faculty for accessing these pools of money. And as we know, the traditional, at least for now, the hypothesis-driven science, the opportunities to respond to those kind of RFPs are really declining. We need to figure out a way to get you in contact with other newer, more different types of pools of funding. So what we're doing is, which is something we haven't done before, Krista mentioned I'm getting a little bit of support to help from the faculty side of things, and we have hired a part-time staff position who lives in Sacramento to help address these things. She has a history of working with the California Ocean Protection Council. So what I'll do now is turn it over to our newest staff member, Amy Vieira, to talk about some of the specifics of what we've been thinking about.
Thank you. Thanks. So Krista thought it might be helpful if I give you just a little bit of my background. I imagine most of you know James, but just to tell you a little bit about me. I've been in ocean and coastal policy making for about 12 years. I started off my career working on the implementation of the Marine Life Protection Act, or the designation of the network of marine protected areas along the entire California coast. And I started working on that in about 2006 when that law was being implemented in the Central Coast, and that was a fascinating process to be involved in. I then moved over to the California Natural Resources Agency and was there for about 7 years, and then most recently I was with the Ocean Protection Council and served as their deputy director for about 3.5 years. And you'll hear later today from Jennifer Eckerly about the Ocean Protection Council. But it's really a unique organization, and I feel truly blessed to have worked there. The council itself is made up of the governor's 2 cabinet level officials that work on either natural resources or environmental issues, as well as the chair of the State Lands Commission, 2 public members, and 2 ex officio or non-voting members from the legislature. The Ocean Protection Council doesn't have any regulatory authority. It really draws its effectiveness from building good relationships. And from my time at the OPC, I really focused a lot of that relationship building with other state and federal agencies. And so this was one of the reasons that I was really drawn to this position at Coast, was that I got to use those relationships and further develop those relationships for the benefit of the CSU system. And this is my first time working in higher education, but it's been, I guess I'm really excited about this. You know, the CSU system educates the most diverse student body in probably the nation. And the fact that you know, the CSU's research is really applied makes my job of connecting research to policy making easy. Maybe I should say easier. It makes it easier. Those are just some reasons why this position was attractive to me. So when I interviewed for this position, I learned kind of for the first time that many of the CSU faculty and staff share the sentiment that your work is often overlooked relative to the UC system in terms of being influential to policymakers or in obtaining funding. And so our team's goal is to make the CSU system more visible. And we are hoping that by making the system and you more visible, it will help you know, these tremendously busy people over here. You know, they need answers to their questions really quickly. And so we want to be sure that CSU faculty cross their mind when they need a question answered. So to that end, we've pursued a couple of approaches or projects, and one of those is California Ocean Day. Since about 2012, Coast has been involved in Ocean Day. This is a day when environmental NGOs come to Sacramento to basically lobby the legislature on ocean issues. There's quite a lot of NGOs that come, and so it's a very powerful day. Coast, again, since 2012, has sponsored a luncheon. And this, well, let me first tell you, this year we decided to do things a little bit differently. So in addition to having a luncheon session, we also co-sponsored with the California Environmental Legislative Caucus a legislative briefing on the topic of offshore wind. And Dr. Ben Ruttenberg from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo was our featured speaker. Jen Eckerly from the Ocean Protection Council was also there. We had a commissioner from the California Energy Commission, and we had a real thought leader from the environmental world. For the luncheon topic, the topic was on the idea of living shorelines, with Krista just mentioned a couple of minutes ago. And we featured San Francisco State University professor Dr. Catherine Cappy Boyer. Other speakers at that event were Assemblymember Eduardo Garcia, Natural Resources Secretary John Laird, and State Coastal Conservancy Chief Deputy Executive Officer Mary Small. So the way that we decide on these topics is we obviously want to have a topic that is of interest to policymakers, agencies, and staff in Sacramento or wherever the legislative session briefing is being held. But we also want to really highlight CSU faculty and the fact that you all are doing cutting edge research in these areas. I think that these two events during California Ocean Day were great successes. During both of these events, it was standing room only. We got attendance from some of the key types of people that we were targeting for attendance. For example, with the legislative briefing, we had staff of the Appropriations Committee. We had several other key staff that were there. And I personally have received a lot of great positive feedback about both Ben and Kathy's presentation. And so I think it did a really good job of highlighting the work of the CSU system, the faculty itself. So right now, and I should back up and say, I've been on the job for about 3 months. And so Ocean Day was took up a lot of time in the first 3 months of my job. But as time goes on, we're going to be doing some of these other initiatives listed on the slide. We're going to be thinking about other legislative briefings or hearings. We have had, and we're going to continue to have one-on-one meetings with legislative staff and agency staff, again with the goal of understanding what is their science needs and can the CSU system help fulfill those needs. We are trying to keep abreast of any state or federal efforts to form science advisory teams, and whether CSU faculty can serve on those teams. And then we're also coordinating with the CSU's Office of Advocacy and State Relations. As you might already know, there's a small office in Sacramento, and their role is really to focus on the overall budget for the CSU system. But they're a wealth of information. They know the legislature inside and out, and so we've been trying to draw upon them as a resource. So we're also keeping tabs on and trying to track key legislative committees. And for brevity's sake on the slide, I didn't list the entire names of all of these committees, but both the Senate and the Assembly obviously have committees that are dedicated to issues such as natural resources, water parks and wildlife, or environmental quality or environmental safety. The Assembly has a select committee on coastal protection and access to natural resources, and Assembly member Mark Stone is the chair of that committee. There's 2 joint committees that I think are particularly relevant to our work, including the Joint Committee on Fisheries and Aquaculture and the Joint Committee on Climate Change Policies. The Fisheries and Aquaculture Committee actually met about 2 weeks ago and had a very interesting meeting. They're going to be sponsoring another legislative briefing in May to talk specifically about the issue of the salmon fishery. And lastly, we're following relevant budget committees and appropriation committees again to see if there's an opportunity for the CSU to be helpful. We're also tracking potential sources of public funding that CSU faculty might be able to take advantage of. So obviously the state has contracts using a diversity of sources that CSU faculty might be able to apply for. We're looking at state bond funds. Currently there's 2 major bonds in the ocean and coastal area, one being Property 4. Property 4 is largely running out. It's been in existence for about 10 years. There's also Proposition 1, which is largely to implement the governor's California Water Action Plan. It's largely focused on water infrastructure, water quality, but there are some ways that maybe more typical coast types of activities can be funded through Proposition 1. These bond funds in general are for capital outlay types of projects. If anybody wants to know more information about what that means, come see me. There's also mitigation or in lieu fee sources of funding that may be appropriate. Once Through Cooling has, I believe, the mitigation or the in lieu fee funds are just coming in now. They're going to be coming to the Ocean Protection Council and the State Coastal Conservancy. I don't know that the DSAL in lieu fee funds have yet been decided where those funds will go, but we are tracking those to see if that might be a potential source. And then also looking just at all the a variety of what I call special funds in the state budget. So things like the greenhouse gas reduction funds, which are the proceeds from carbon auction, and just proactively exploring those options to see how we might be able to fund coast faculty. So with that, I think I'm turning it back over to James.
Thanks, Amy. So just to touch base again on some things that Krista already brought up, one of the things that we're going to continue to do is to extract information from you that helps us cultivate the relationships in Sacramento and DC that we need, and that includes some of the content that Krista talked about already, information we've started to collect from you in earnest last year. These types of information provide data that allow us to establish our bona fides when talking to agency staff and legislative committees to encourage them to call us before they go to Wikipedia. So we will be continuing to return to you with for this type of information. And as a particular example that we initiated last year, if you all recall, for those of you who were here, we participated in an exciting, somewhat painful exercise of populating Google Earth with your monitoring sites. That has all been now migrated over into ARC, so we have these as ArcGIS files now. And the idea is this is broadly the representative of the projects that we started working on last year that cover multiple ecosystems, multiple taxonomic groups, and multiple campuses. With the idea that in this tool alone, we have a very strong representation of the breadth and depth of the CSU that I don't think is captured by any other institution in the state of California. And we're hopeful that there's going to be sometime later in the spring, early summer, we're going to have a hearing in Sacramento that will address this and other types of monitoring. So if you recall, this exercise was a first pass, not at all intended to be comprehensive at that point. And we're going to continue to come back to you to lock in more information about the things that are, the dots that are already up there, as well as to introduce new dots. And the idea being, for those of you who don't recall, we're looking for projects that have longevity. So things, not one-off projects that you're doing with a class one semester, but something that has a frequency and a longevity that allows us to put this up. When we make this public, we're going to want people to point to individual dots, and we want some content to be under those dots. So if there are projects that have arisen since last year, and if there was new information related to any of these, we are in the receiving mode, and we'll be happy to include as much as possible. And I guess we should apologize up front now for what will be a number of queries coming in the coming months as we try to understand what's up here a little bit better. I know I don't like receiving those queries myself, so I'm sorry to foist them on you, but it's going to happen. I think this ultimately is going to be in some kind of data portal that, I don't know that data will necessarily be a part of it in the near term, but at least a comprehensive list of who's doing what, where, when, and how is going to be hugely powerful as we continue to have discussions with the state agencies and federal agencies about solving California's problems, leveraging all the considerable infrastructure and activities that we've already got going on. So with that, I think we'll wrap up for lunch, and this is our contact information. If anybody has any questions,